Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my super awesome big brother.
It's, again, still my favorite role.
Cheers to you.
And to you, my brother. Cheers.
And cheers to you for joining us tonight.
And every Friday night on Sex Talk. And we like to take this opportunity to talk about all things sexual. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us in these discussions.
And would be so grateful if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. And, of course, likes and shares are very welcomed. And if you came to us through Facebook, likes and shares over there as well, and comments. We'd love to hear your feedback and questions and what you'd like to hear us talk about.
Indeed. All right. So any suggestions for topics or, again, anything that you have to say, we'd be happy to hear it. All right. So we had the week off last week. Mm-hmm. We did take a little break. Didn't really make it any less of a busy week.
Right.
But a lot of things been going on. Certainly on a lot of different fronts, and I want to make another toast here, especially that we're still in June, and June being Pride Month, and a lot of things that have been going on this month, especially a lot of good things going on this month. I want to give a shout out to everybody who is celebrating Pride Month, whatever your flag, whatever your initial, right? Salute.
Yes, I think there's been increasingly more awareness and normalizing than ever before.
Yeah.
Like we had said for a few years about millennials, now we can continue to say even more so with Gen Zers, just moving the needle further and faster.
That's right.
So that people's sexual orientation or gender identity is more and more like a so what kind of thing.
Exactly. Which, again, I think we do talk about this a lot as well, that there is that conflation between sexual orientation and gender identity. They really are separate parts of us, separate things, but, they all kind of get lumped together. Sure. But, I've been asked by a number of people in the last couple of weeks, and this is something, again, talk about a generational thing as well, that a lot of people that are kind of asking, why are there so many, all of a sudden, so many gay people, all of a sudden, so many trans people, why, what's going on? Isn't this a trendy thing? And I think it's really important that, everybody who can takes the opportunity to kind of call that out. It's not that there's all of a sudden all of these gay people and trans people. They've
new
always
under the sun.
been here. The only thing that is different is there's now visibility. And that's so important.
A somewhat safer world to come out into.
Well, that's a big part of the visibility, because it never was safe. And, we have to understand that visibility kind of means legitimacy. And, it's easy to forget if you are not part of a marginalized community, what it must be like to grow up and never seeing yourself reflected anywhere in media or any aspect of society. So the fact that there are more shows, the fact that so many people know who Laverne Cox is, the fact that there's so much normalization.
Yeah, we have members of Congress now.
Absolutely.
Who are out and an NFL player.
That's right. It just came out.
Actively playing.
Right, I believe on the Raiders.
A lot of guys came out after they retired, but never before has someone actively been playing in the NFL.
That's right. We have a UFC fighter who's trans. I think 2 actually. And again, we're seeing more and more, and it's really a good thing because, like I said, that normalization, that visibility, it kind of allows people to feel like they're really human and that they really exist. Right? And again, that's a good thing for everybody. Right?
Yeah.
But it is confusing for people who have lived sheltered lives and who really have not seen beyond their own horizons.
Yeah.
Right? So, we have to be patient with that.
Yeah, and in addition to Pride Month, June is also, of course, the month in which Father's Day happens every year.
That's right.
I'm not quite sure how long we've been celebrating Father's Day and Mother's Day. But we wanted to talk about that tonight, and maybe some more traditional gender roles when it comes to
A different way of
parenting
taking pride.
Yeah, indeed, right? We often talk here on Sex Talk as sexuality educators about how if people have a kid, you inherit a new job title. Whether
That's
you
right.
take that job or not, whether you do it well, is another story, but people have
Whether
kids.
you want it or not.
Right. People have kids, they become sexuality educators. Right? It shouldn't be a real job for people like us because in a perfect world, there wouldn't be a need.
That's right.
Right? Because parents would raise sexually healthy kids and sex ed would be just a normal part of raising kids. Just as frank and matter of fact as teaching a kid about any other aspect of health. Oral hygiene to anything, right? Sexual health and hygiene should be just as easy to talk about as anything else.
Right. And I think it's probably
But
in
it
this
isn't.
country as easy to talk about as, nutrition, exercise.
Well, but a lot of those things that we know about and don't necessarily do.
Right.
But with sexual health, it doesn't really even get lip service, right?
Unless you're providing lip service, then that's a different show. But yeah, I mean, it is something that again we've talked about this, we've wondered about this, we've opined about this for so long that the one thing that is such a core aspect of every human being's life, we want to ignore, like it doesn't exist. We don't acknowledge it.
Yeah. And again, people who have children, and we'll save it for another show to review how that happens, right? Then why is it so easy to forget that these little creatures you just made through a sexual act are going to be sexual beings just like you?
La 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 la
Yeah,
la
right.
la.
There's where
Right.
it goes.
Yeah.
So not just for parents, but tonight we wanted to, in honor of Father's Day, talk about something that, again, we've been talking about for a really, really long time and came close to resuscitating a couple of years ago before COVID had other plans.
That's right.
But specifically, we were talking in 2019 about this program we used to do in the 90s in our old sexuality educator and Planned Parenthood days for, I think, about 5 or 6 years running, called Daddy's Little Girl. The role of fathers in the healthy sexual development of their daughters.
Yeah.
And they were great, right? We would ask that...
Yeah.
Daughters be like between 9 and 14, and
That's right. We wanted to be
that,
pre-puberty if possible.
well, around that time, and no moms if possible, and the girls would get together in one part of the building and spend an hour or so with a woman therapist, usually Jill Morris, or another of our friends and colleagues, and dads would meet with us, and we would talk about these very, very important issues about how critical it is and how sadly ironic that it seems yeah, of course, throughout a daughter's entire development, but especially around those puberty ages,
Yeah,
around
yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12, when daughters really arguably need their dads the most. Dad starts to back
Right.
off, right?
Right.
Sometimes even literally. Like, oh, puberty
right.
stuff.
That's right. No,
like,
there's a
yeah,
physical
oh,
disconnection.
That's your mom's department. I'm gonna go jump in the back seat now.
Right.
And that's kind of sad. Often that starts this kind of yearning. And we see, you know, how often do you hear people talk about, not even in therapy, but just people in general talk about someone with daddy issues, right? And what that really means, and
Right.
how a woman might get into a bad relationship pattern by chasing that kind of missing piece.
Yeah, exactly. And before we go too far away from that, I want to add one more piece because you kind of just went around it. But another important part of those workshops is when we had the girls processing here, we had the dads that we were processing here. There was then the coming together.
Oh, that was
and the
what
most
made
important
it.
part of it is it became an opportunity that even really close relationships never really had, where these dads were able to sit down and really listen to their daughters, hear what their daughters
right.
wanted and what were
was
asking
most
for.
powerful and talk about permission giving is having the girls be able to ask dads questions as a group. So one girl didn't have to stand up and ask her dad, you
Right.
know, that
Exactly.
it was just all the girls asking all the dads. So whether it was about being sexually active or considering becoming sexually active or conversations about birth control or whatever was on their mind, whatever they wanted to talk about, that was definitely the most powerful part.
Yeah, it really, and still when I think about that and how powerful those things were, and then I'm reminded that when you look at all the literature and all the research on family dynamics and family roles and interactions, the father-daughter relationship is the least studied. It's one of the most important, but it is the least study of any of these family dynamics.
I mean, I remember even when we first were talking about putting the program together, it was because there was this long history of mommy and me kinds of programs. There was a lot of mother-daughter,
Right.
Historically. That was one of the Planned Parenthood regulars. But not a lot. Occasionally there was father and son things, but those usually were about like bonding around sports or some outdoors kinds
Well, it
of.
depends on who did it. Well, I didn't do it that way. Right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things with the Daddy's Little Girl. When I was doing these Just Like Mom type of programs, I think what made my work different, and then later your work when you were picking that stuff up, is that we also had that piece of having the moms include the dads. That was that was some of the most gratifying things that I ever heard from people, and I think that's kind of what led into sort of doing this. So even that Mommy and Me, that Just Like Mom, those kinds of programs, they can be really powerful if it's not just about mom, bringing dad in, right? And especially around those puberty years. So what is it that we found? Why is that father-daughter relationship so important? Especially, again, with the title, related to healthy sexual development.
There's so many of these sexist cliches and stereotypes that, so many of us have grown up with. The scenario of a dad maybe waiting up for his son to come home from his first date and, give him the high five when he found out he scored and like the puff chest pride, oh, that's my boy. But the same dad will have a daughter and think that he can lock her in her room until she's 30.
Right. Or waiting for her to come back on her first date with a shotgun and a baseball bat.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say next. The only kind of script that there ever really has been traditionally is that classic dad with the shotgun, right? Which, if you think about the roles there, right, you have dad, the daughter, and some young man who is just automatically cast as some predator, right, someone who's looking to take something from the daughter that the dad has to protect with deadly force if necessary.
Now, again, just for a little pause in here, because you're talking about this as a script.
Yeah.
We need to acknowledge that script, because that's probably the only time that men acknowledge their own behavior.
Right.
Because look at the projection that's a part of that script. I'll be damned if I'm going to let some guy do to my daughter what I was doing to other daughters.
To her mom.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So the only way to read that, those roles, the assumptions, is that the daughter is an idiot.
Right. It's so disrespectful.
Completely incapable of protecting herself or making any decisions.
Making a good decision for herself
about her sexuality. And like I said, the young man is a predator that has to be stopped with lethal force if necessary. And dad's only job is to protect his daughter's virtue.
Right.
We talked not long ago about those really super creepy virginity ceremonies.
Those abstinence,
right?
virginity.
Those,
I pledged my virginity to my father.
And they're like they look like wedding ceremonies, and there's exchanges of rings, and it's just so super creepy. Yeah, like dad owns his daughter's sexuality.
Dad owns his daughter's hymen.
Oh.
Yeah, it really is an awful thing, and if any of you have seen that, there's really something so inherently creepy about that.
Yeah. And I mean, why is it so novel a thought that we can raise sexually healthy and empowered daughters who we can trust will make the right decisions for themselves and you know.
Well, look at the framing even. This is my son, this is my boy, a young man. But with the girl, this is my little princess. I wish I had it, because I would love to show it my favorite mug. Right? It's like, I am not daddy's little princess. I am a tough, capable little girl. Right? And I like that. I think that's a great message. And I think the whole princess, fragile, like you said, like a little Fabergé egg that has to be protected and cared for and buffered between her and the world. It's just not realistic. It sets up for failure, right? And again, it's incredibly disrespectful.
Yeah,
and it really, in a lot of ways,
these roles,
and it denies girls the opportunity to really grow and develop and become fully functioning people. Right? It's really a very repressive thing. And we know that there are a lot of things that are connected to that father-daughter relationship. Father's presence in the daughter's life is so important. And what few research studies there are out there have been pretty consistent. Right? Never in any way, shape, or form denying the importance of the mother in all of this, but there is a unique significance that the father can play in the daughter's life.
I mean, wouldn't you say it's safe to say that young women learn how to be treated by men by watching first how their moms are treated by their dads,
right?
If the family's intact. Or just the roles that they play, even if they're not, right? Dads can be actively involved in raising their kids without necessarily being physically present the house.
That's right.
That's not what's best for all the relationships.
And that's a good point to clarify, because when we talk about dads being absent, that is a different issue than dads living with their daughters. Right? You can be a present father. You can be an engaged, active father and not live with your daughter.
Right. And conversely, we've seen plenty of dads who are there living in the house, but so wrapped up in work or whatever else that they're really not present
Exactly.
In the kids'
Exactly.
lives. Remember also back in the 90s when there was that rash of babies being dumped in dumpsters and canals and bathrooms during proms.
Right, because places like Florida, also, well, later on, also kind of made it legal in some ways. But yeah,
Well,
it was that hiding the pregnancies.
Yeah, but
and trying
how
to flush
many
the
of
baby
those,
down the toilet.
Right, but how many of these girls, these horror stories did we hear, where like they gave birth in silence in the bathroom next to the den where the entire family was watching TV,
Right.
and
Right.
sneak out and
Right, exactly. And
you
how
can be
disconnected?
really absent.
How disconnected do you have to be? I don't care what the body type and shape of a teenage girl is. How disconnected do you have to be to go through 9 months and not know that your daughter is pregnant?
Yeah, that's
Right? How can they successfully hide that? So some of the things that we know are beneficial in terms of that father-daughter relationship. We know that a father being present and actively engaged in a daughter's life can actually help her make better decisions about both sex and romantic relationships. There is a template that does get set.
yeah.
Right? And especially if there is that sort of double whammy of having that father be a role model for loving and trusting communication with the daughter, but also modeling that in the relationship with the mom. Right? Then that becomes even more impactful.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, we have to acknowledge that dad is, for many, many girls, the first significant and influential love.
Yeah.
Right? So there
And
really is
just
template
just as
setting
you said
there.
that, I was thinking about how often, of course, we see a skewed population in sex therapy and couples therapy, but how many kids are watching their dads have affairs
Right.
and learning that relationship stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, going back to what is not just opinion, but has been sort of validated, empirically. But when we look at that connection that dads can have with their daughters, it really can provide an incredible buffer between the daughter and negative sexual and relationship outcomes. Right? Dad being present and especially being connected, right? The relationship is founded on open communication, trust, a high level of contact. Then we pretty much see across the board later sexual initiation. Right? In other words, when these girls become sexually active, it is
less
later.
consequences. Less
There's
unintended pregnancy.
Unintended pregnancy is not there. Much lower rates of intimate partner violence. Much lower rates of risky sexual behavior, however that is defined, across the board. And the more open the communication, the greater the trust, the greater the level of contact, the lower those types of outcomes tend to be.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the same, like when we used to, the objections that we used to have to deal with like doing a good touch, bad touch program.
Right.
It's like, what parent is really going to raise their hand and say, I'm in favor of my kid being at greater risk for sexual assault? Right? Who's out of their mind enough to say that? But yet, when they say, no, I don't want this program being taught in my kid's school, that's in effect what they're doing.
Right. And again, the setup for this girl's life, again, like I was saying before, almost like creating that template, because we do know that when fathers are absent or disengaged, whether that's through divorce, and especially if those negative feelings toward the mother are also then projected and taken out on the daughter, and unfortunately that happens a lot. Father is incarcerated, father leaves, for whatever the reason is, they're not present or connected, right? That absenteeism. So when fathers are absent, girls end up often having great difficulty learning how to trust others, especially when it comes to sexual and romantic relationships. And it creates much more uncertainty in what they feel they can expect in their romantic and sexual relationships. So there's definitely a void. There's definitely a missing piece when dads are not actively engaged in their daughter's life.
Yeah, and let's touch back on that jumping in the back seat idea, that the discomfort and fear that daughter's puberty often elicits in dad. Right? Because it means having to admit that she's a sexual human being.
That's right.
And not this completely sexless doll, Daddy's little girl's easy when she's 4 and 5 and bouncing on his knee and hugging and squeezing. But when those pubertal changes are noticeable.
I mean, again, let them come, especially breast
debate,
development.
Yeah, the debate we had between, are they big booblets or little boobs? Right. That freaks a lot of guys out.
It really does.
They get awkward around touching their kids.
That's right. Hugging, they pull back. No hugging. Oh my God, I can't hug this little girl like my little girl. Squeeze her tight, hold her tight against me, and feel breasts pressing back against me.
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable for a lot of guys. Right? But again, that's not about their daughters. That's about their own sexual discomfort.
Right.
And that general pervasive discomfort, especially with female bodies. Right? I don't think there's anything except maybe black, lesbian, trans women that are more threatening to our society than adolescent girls.
Yeah, because
with the emerging sexuality
is so overt, and adolescent boys terrify old people because it's so overt.
Right. Yeah. Now, there's some good news. I think, to speak to that those fathers that are pulling away, that are very uncomfortable when their daughters are going through puberty, that can't still see them as their daughter, and again, for some reason, making that switch in their mind to now they're sexual women, right? Or at least the fear of that. But here's good news for guys that are uncomfortable with that there is some very interesting data that shows that fathers that are connected to their daughters in that way, they have that open, loving communication. The more that father is around, on average, we see those girls going into puberty later.
So, physiological changes are happening more slowly.
Yes.
Just by dad being present. That's amazing.
It really is. Now, there's nobody can really explain that. Some of the offered explanations, at least the biological one, is that dad's presence, right? Again, especially that constant presence, that trusting presence. It might be pheromones that. And again, we are wired biologically to not be sexually responsive to our parents and our family. So it is possible that dad's pheromones could be keeping puberty delayed.
Wow.
Right? Because the other side of that also seems to be true. When dad's not
gone,
present,
she has to grow
especially, but not only, just having to grow up, but if dad is not there and mom dates and mom has male friends, the presence of male strangers, feeling non-related men seem to trigger earlier puberty. Right? So there does seem to be this physiological responsiveness that goes in there. So dads, if you are, and you're thinking about this, and the idea of your girl becoming a woman is uncomfortable, then stay connected.
Absolutely.
Right? Stay connected. You can kind of put that discomfort off a little bit longer. But I just find that one of those fascinating things. Especially when we look at so many girls who have that kind of abandonment, that don't have that relationship with their father.
Yeah. So even if it's something as simple as getting a good sex ed book and reading it together, those of you guys with daughters, Roby Harris has probably my favorite books, and one for all those ages. Right,
Yes.
the first one is Perfectly Normal for 9 to 14-year-olds. Then It's So Amazing for like 6 to 9-year-olds, and then It's Not the Stork for young ones, like 4 to 6-year-olds.
Right.
And it would be just so wonderful if dads got those books
Absolutely.
and asked to read them together. Even if you just get the book for your daughter and she knows, wow, my dad gave me this book. That's pretty cool. And then to ask, can we read it, some of it together? Would just go so far in those relationships.
Absolutely. And, I want to throw in a couple of things as well that dads can do in addition to getting books, maybe reading with them. But you know what? Ask your daughter. Talk to your daughter, well, especially if you're in the car, right? Again, we've talked about this before. The car is the best place for difficult or uncomfortable conversations because it's literally a captive audience. Right?
And don't ask about her directly. Ask about her friends.
Right, and again, it could be something like that. Yeah, what do your friends think about the changes that are coming up, depending on how old? If it's before, what's it like now that you've gone through? Maybe having your period again. You can. I think we shouldn't be afraid of making it personal either. But the more dads can be involved in the physical development, because that's one of the things that most dads, even those that are connected, tend to do. Okay, you're starting to have those. You're starting to have those. Talk to your mother. Right? That's girl stuff. No, but your dad, you're just as much of a resource. You should know about this stuff. Read up on it. Learn. Be there for her in that same way. This is not just a mom thing.
Yeah, I just recalled those studies in the 80s that said that the number one source of information about sex and intercourse for teenage girls was teenage boys.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, just this goofy analogy that who would be the best source of information for chicks, baby chicks, about laying eggs and growing up? The hens, the roosters, Farmer Brown, or the wolves, right? Not to sell out guys, but probably not the best agenda or best motivation.
I don't think it's selling out. I think it's calling out, because the reality is, if you any group of people you want to do, adolescent boys, hands down, know less about sex and sexuality than any other group of people. Right? And one thing they are often good at is sincerely being insincere. I think that is something that adolescent boys have had for eons.
Yeah.
Right? And we've even done demonstrations. Oh, but he said he loved me. Oh, really? Really? How easy is that to say? Like, of course I care about you. Oh, we can always sound so sincere, and we mean it so much.
Tonight.
Of course. That's right. Right? So, one of the things that helps make girls less susceptible to that is being empowered with knowledge, being empowered with having role models and having people that they can talk to. People in their minds, the power of just being able to think, how can I talk to my father about this? That's a powerful regulator of both thoughts and behaviors. Right? And I feel I also want to throw in here that we're focused. Right? Again, there's only so much time we have to talk about certain things. So we're focused here on dads raising biological daughters. Right? There are some overlapping, but there are obviously different issues when we talk about dads raising trans daughters.
Or stepdaughters.
Right? And other types, exactly. But again, you're still dealing with the biological stepdaughter. It's just navigating the relationship a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Right? So I think some of the issues that are going to present themselves with an assigned gender situation is going to be a little different, right? Sure. Especially in navigating some of the pubertal changes. But that is, again, depending on what's happening, it doesn't have to be that far afield. It's still all about the relationship, all about the connection. That's where the safety factors are.
Yeah. So hopefully Father's Day 2022, we'll be able to announce the return of Daddy's little girl.
Indeed.
And get together at convention center or something.
Yeah, and really pull that out and bring that back out. And
Yeah.
and again, I think we can add some new and different twists to that. All right. And before we finish, I also just wanted, as a shout out, right? Because we're just focused on this one aspect of it, but of course, dads are very important in boys' lives as well. And I want to take a moment, and I would like to propose a toast, because this was the first Father's Day that we had without our father.
Dear old Dad.
Yes. So again, we can attest to the importance of fathers in boys' lives as well. So I want to just give one more toast to Dad.
Yes. So that'll do it for this week's Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. We thank you for joining us.
Indeed. And this and every Friday, right, 7 o'clock, we premiere, but you can watch anytime throughout the week. And again, we thank you for tuning in to us. A lot of things out there to take your attention. Yeah, I was thinking, I had a TikTok thing in my mind there for some reason. Right? Because again, that's another alternative for you out there. But we appreciate you tuning in to us. And thank you. Again, like, subscribe, comment. We would love to hear from you. So until next week, thank you. We are the Siegel Brothers. Take care and good night.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.